Good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning, ladies and
I can keep going on and on about how great he is, but the book can tell you, you get your own copy. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Douglas MacArthur Cotton.
Yeah, I'll be shameless here. I thought you were gonna say I walked the water or something. Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be here today. And I don't have very much to say more than, I see Dave out there and some of the other old folks like myself. It is first a pleasure to still be able to stand and speak and talk with you. I guess I'm often asked about how did you get involved or why did you get involved? I remember once I was in Texas and a news reporter wanted to know, why were you concerned about civil rights, about voting rights? Before I knew it, I asked him, why are you concerned about civil rights and voting rights? That's a natural thing, I thought. I was taught that to be a good citizen, you're supposed to vote. You're supposed to look out after your neighbors. And you also have the responsibility of making sure that the politics of your society or whatever entity is you're in is working in your behalf. And the only way we could do that, was to vote. And that has been denied us. And I was just, y'all have to excuse me. I'm not good at this, but had been thinking not long ago. I thought that segregation was the system. But as studying, I found out segregation was an instrument to make the system work, the system of economic, depression and political depression. And I think one reason I thought about that, those of you who were around at the time, if you notice, we demonstrated a few months or so, and they took the signs down, Okay, y'all can go to the restaurants and all that kind of stuff. But for some strange reason, we demonstrated, we got beaten, jailed years and years before we got into voting rights. Much the same way with the schools. In 54, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation was unconstitutional in the schools. But even now, they have taken the sign down from the restaurants and stuff, but the schools were still segregated. Even up into the 70s that, it got to the point to say, well, maybe we resisted long enough and we'll put enough other things in place that we'll destroy the school system enough that it won't be prosperous like it should. So, but I just thinking about that and thinking about where we are, and now looking at where we are and see that we are facing a revisit of oppression in America. So I think we have to be real strategic now about what we do and how we do it, and try to do it in a way that those who are, in our community, those who are younger, that they can see some worth in what we are trying to do. So that's my say for today. So if anybody have any questions, if I can't answer them, I got a lot of people I can call on. They'll probably answer them for you.
Anybody want to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
Hi, I have the mic. My question and my concern is, what do you say to young people who don't feel that it's necessary to vote, or they're convinced that their votes don't count because the system is rigged? Those people who went through the struggle to gain the right to vote. For me, it was a visceral response when I heard someone say that, and I don't understand how they feel it's okay not to vote.
Well, it's kind of hard now when you have mayors and senators and representatives being arrested for doing their job. So it's kind of hard to just say, well, if you vote, everything gonna be okay. So I guess the main thing, we have to show that through voting, there's some liberating qualities in it. And that has to do with making sure that those who are elected are accountable. And that seems to be a problem. It seems that we often get elected and we feel that our constituency owe us instead of, being their servants.
Hey, Uncle. My question is, can you tell us a story about the most diverse or one of the most diverse things that you had to go through during the civil rights movement? We've heard so many things in the family tree about a lot of the different things that you faced. Maybe you could share a story that sticks out to you in your memory.
Oh, that's a question that I'm often asked. But when you grow up in a state-sponsored terror, and everything you know around you is terror, it gets kind of where you don't think so much of the worst. You kind of think of, how I got over, and waiting for the next thing to happen. But there are, a lot of things. I think probably the most, I wouldn't say it wasn't necessarily frightening, of course, it was hurtful when Mr. Medgar was assassinated. And I really didn't even get to grieve properly, I guess, for the simple reason that I knew that we was at a crossroad. If the movement didn't intensify, we were probably gonna be wiped out. The movement would probably be crushed. So it was kind of a lot of silent thoughts, so to speak, because that's one of those situations you didn't really want to talk to nobody about it. You want to really realize or find out within yourself, what must we do to make sure that this movement continues. And I think that was something that weighed on me more than probably any other one thing.
Hi. So you talk about your friends and family in the room. We know that during the civil rights movement, you were putting your physical and mental health on the line. How did the support from your immediate community, so your friends and your family, impact your fight for civil rights?
Well, one of the things, quite a few of my immediate family was in, they was teachers working for the state. So there's always a chance that they, would be victim of collateral damage, I guess you would say. And but as far as their support, I didn't have any of them to just, tell me that I shouldn't take a stand, I shouldn't be active.
Hello. Over here, yeah. Currently, there's a law, I think it's being enacted, or they're thinking about having it enacted in the state, which Mississippi educators cannot talk about diversity, equality, and inclusion. And I had heard you say a moment ago about how, kind of laid into that we're going through a second phase, or maybe it's just peaking again. But I'm just wondering your thoughts on Jim Crow 2.0.
I guess if I be truthful, I would say that I never got out of 1.0. I knew that it definitely was a struggle, incomplete. If you paid any attention, and those of you who have, I know most of you did, it's just as soon, well, there was those among us never quit fighting against our rights, or fighting against our citizenship. So, I knew that they were, the chances of this day was very likely, because we had it under Nixon, Reagan, on and on and on, and all the others in between. It was a matter of who tried to go back the fastest. So we had some that didn't go try to take us back as fast as others. Like Clinton, he was real smooth. He did the kind of the economic thing on us and stuff, kind of taking us back kind of easy. And what that baby Bush called it, he had a name for that. What did baby Bush call it? Anyway, I forgot, but he had some kind of nice name for his action.
Mr. Cotton, we have a question from the live stream from Sarah Campbell. Had asked, Mr. Cotton, please tell us about your childhood and family life. I'm interested in the circumstances that produce activists.
My childhood and my family life?
Family life and childhood and the circumstances that produce activists.
Oh. Well, I get one thing, I grew up in a loving, caring family, loving and caring community. It very well fortified and protected basically as a kid, but I was learning from the media and the word of mouth of what kind of society we lived in. And then of course, when I was able to go to school, we had to walk about a mile, I guess. And of course, my neighbors, the white neighbors, they had a bus to ride, but they didn't even so much build a school for them. The white kids in my neighborhood, they were all poor. We were all small farmers, with no plantation in the area that I was in. So the whites and the blacks were economically basically the same. But so the county didn't have a school for those whites. They had to go across the county line into Lee County to go to school. And of course, they had a bus, and we had the schools. Of course, at that time, the community people built the schools because I think it's in as soon as the I was trying to say white liners, but that's not the word. As soon as the Reconstruction began to end, as soon as they took the soldiers out, I would say, one of the first bills that the Mississippi legislature passed was to make it illegal to build schools for people. So, of course, that meant that, you had to build your own schools if you had it. I'm sure it was some small print that certain people were, getting tax money to build the schools. But that's the kind of thing. So I would imagine my neighbors, they didn't quite meet the status. In other words, they were whitish. They weren't really white because they were, people with 35 acres of land, 70, just like we were.
Mr. Cotton, another question from our live stream is, can you take us back to 1961 and making your way into Southwest Mississippi, a dangerous place, and what some of those experiences were down in that part of Mississippi?
Yeah, I was working in the library of the school. It was some school session was about ended, and somebody told me that somebody wanted to see me, and just so happened to have been Bob Moses, and he was concerned about getting people to go, to Macomb and do voter registration. And of course, my father was always the advocate of voting, so, hear that. I really like that. I've been kind of involved with the freedom rides and interested in the city, but it wasn't quite where I was. But to organize politically, that I found that very interesting, and so he asked me if I could find a couple other people, which I was able to talk to George Lowe, his sister right here on the front. And I also talked to Jesse Harris, but Jesse had been working here in Hinds County. He said, well, I think that I'm gonna stay here and work here, which was good. And Jimmy Travis, I spoke to him and he was interested. And so, we went, and incidentally, George said, yeah, I'll go. I think he said, my dad and C.C. Bryan, his first cousin. So that was kind of nice. And also we were sent to Talatown, and we stayed with Uncle Bob Bryant. That's what we call him, Uncle Bob. He was the elder man. He was Mr. C.C.'s uncle also. So that was a big plus for us because we were able to, we became part of the family right quickly.
What was that relationship like with Bob Moses? Your relationship with Bob Moses?
Is there what now?
Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Bob Moses?
Wow. He was a bit, I thought he was a good friend of mine. He was a kind person, and he was different. He reminded me a lot of Mr. Evers, I guess you could say, in a way. He was younger, but never asked you to do something that he wouldn't do. And I've been around people who are good at pointing you. You go there, go there. And he was different, quite intelligent. I think that even that includes me also. I don't think we had any idea that people would be shooting and beating you over the head and killing you just because you were going to try to register to vote. I knew it was dangerous, but I thought, that they were going to go ahead and register people, and then when they get ready to take their seat, that's when the fight was going to start. Somebody knows, I don't know why I thought that, but they resisted from the, very early age. But yeah, Bob was quite an interesting person. He's a hard worker, a real thinker.
Hi, can you talk about what led you to attend Tougaloo College and what was it like being a student there in the 60s?
Will you repeat, please?
Yes, what led you to attend Tougaloo College and what was it like being a student there in the 60s?
Oh, yeah, with Tougaloo, that it was a private school. The state didn't have any real power over it. And it also, at that time, it also had made a name as a progressive place, stood for, civil rights and all that. I had a couple of sisters that graduated from Tougaloo, and I was kind of familiar with the campus, and it was kind of place that I thought I wanted to be, but I had no idea that when I get there in 60, all the other, the whole nation would be moving in a new direction, and the students would be as involved as they were. And Tougaloo was one of those places that they could exercise at. And it wasn't so much that the Tougaloo students were any more eager than the other students, because when the Tougaloo 9 stood up, the Jackson State students, several of them, they had a prayer vigil or something. Anyway, they eventually wound up several hundred, a couple of hundred anyway, was demonstrating. And a couple of my friends got kicked out. The Latinist sisters got kicked out, and they were sent to Tougaloo. And that's kind of also happened to make Tougaloo different. Students, as they were getting kicked out of other schools, maybe public schools, they would come to Tougaloo, so that gave us a broader, that worked.
Could you tell us, Mac, here I am, straight in front of you. Okay. So how many years did you spend at Tougaloo? Were you a freshman or a sophomore when you dropped out?
I dabbled around about 5 years.
Okay.
You would ask that.
And Mac, when you got to Macomb, who were some of the other SNCC people there, or the name of the people who you were working with, and what was your first assignment once you got to Macomb?
Well, some of the people I was working with, of course, local was like Curtis Hayes, Hollis Watkins, Jackie Martin, and Eula. Matter of fact, I'll tell y'all to stand. But that were, and then Brenda Travis. Those are some of the names, but there are many, many other people. And then there's some of the SNCC staff. John Hardy, of course, he went to over in Teletown. We were over there, and Reggie Robertson. Quite a few, Dion Dowman, and then others came in. Trat Bribbett. Anyway, I won't try to remember his name.
Travis Britt?
Yeah, that's it, Travis Britt. So, I think it's about 12. And of course, I forget my grandchildren's names, so I'll stop right here.
So Mac, at what point were you joined by Chuck McDo and Marion Barry Jr. and people like that? At what point did they join?
Right, they came at that same summer, but they were, I think, kind of responding to some of the atrocities that was going on. So, and even James Bevel from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference came, and so they were, they was right around all the same time. We're talking a couple of month periods, so we looked up and they was there.
Mac, I just want to say this, that at Macomb, with all the persons you named, including the people here, and with all the other folk at SNCC and other individuals there, is that was really, you all were the founding mothers and fathers of SNCC in Mississippi. I mean, it was like the beginning of the above ground movement in Mississippi. And you and Jimmy and the rest of the folk that you named, I mean, y'all were the people that really began to transform Mississippi. So we wouldn't be, quite frankly, in this building if y'all hadn't done what y'all did then.
Okay, my question is, could you expound a little bit more about what was the breaking point to where enough is enough? I have to get into the fight. What was that point in life?
I think I was already there. The difference was that coming to Tougaloo gave me an opportunity to meet other people who were there. And then, of course, in the early 60s, February, the sit-ins broke out. So it was activities all over. And then throughout the Caribbean and definitely on the continent, you had Lumumba and all those people who were, looking toward liberating their country. So it was a really international movement. We were just a small part of that movement.
I hope you don't mind. I'm over here to your left. I lean left. I Googled you just now, and I realized your first name your whole name is Douglas MacArthur Cotton. How did your parents decide to give you the name Douglas MacArthur?
By the book.
Okay, they must have expected a lot of you. You had high expectations. They had high expectations, right? They wanted you to be courageous and a leader and so on and so forth. Did they?
I kind of doubt that.
Did your dad serve in World War II?
Pardon?
Did your dad serve?
Oh, no. I had two brothers served in World War II.
Okay. Okay, just curious.
First of all, I want to congratulate you on getting that doctorate from Tougaloo College on commencement. And I think people need to recognize that you guys suffered a lot of beatings and terrorism during the time you were trying to register. You are not focusing on that and emphasizing that, but that was very important. That was a deterrent for the work that you were trying to do. People need to know how bloodied that situation was in Walthall County. So would you speak on that, please? To enlighten people as to how terrific and horrific it was at that time.
Well, I try to say a word or two. Of course, we were there. It was hard to get people really willing to go because it was so violent there. It had been they had taken everybody off the road, voter rolls in Walthall County. There were, and even we tried to, there was a professor from Alcorn State who went to try to register, and he couldn't pass the literacy test. Of course, we understand that the circuit clerk was a grade dropout, A grade student. So, but he could determine whether or not the college professor passed the literacy test. So that's. But of course, they backed that up with guns and one incident. We took a couple of people up to register. John Hardy accompanied them, and I went over to, going over to the library. But anyway, before I could get to the library, I heard a ruckus, and the circuit clerk had hit John over the head with the pistol, and he was, bleeding and very badly. And the police came up. I say, this man been hit. You need to do something about it. So, well, you on the arrest. He arrested him, and of course we were armed with a dime and a phone number to the Justice Department, and one to the headquarters in Macomb. But it just had one dime, of course. So, so I used that to call the Justice Department. And like so many things happened in my life, as I look back, somehow I didn't get the elevator music, as we call it, and all that. The call went right through to the Justice Department, and I was able, to tell them what was happening. And they arranged so John wouldn't be taken to jail and wouldn't be left in jail in Talatown because they figured he would surely die. So they moved him over to Pike County. But that kind of stuff was every day, I guess I can't complain. I'm still here. There's so many, lost their lives, the Maine, so yes, I hope that answers your question somehow.
Okay, it seems to me as if education is one of your major interests. And I was just wondering if the Brown versus Board of Education decision of 1954, if that in any way influenced your interest in education, that 1954 decision of Brown versus Board of Education. Did that in any way affect your behavior towards education? I don't know if you're understanding what I'm asking.
Of course it did, all the rulings, and I thought that maybe the next year or so, the schools would be open like they're supposed to. But we found out that they were dragging their feet. I'm thinking that kind of stuff, I think, is really what caused the sit-in movement, because we were of a different mindset. Our parents had been fighting for years and grandparent, a law would pass, but the circumstances would be the same. So I think we just started saying, well, I am a citizen, whether you like it or not. So I'm gonna sit here if I want to. I'm gonna, go register if I want to. I know you don't want me to. You're not. I know you just writing out bills and acts and all that kind of stuff, not backing them up. You could have backed up the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. None of this would have happened. But we get it, every time we would protest, we would get us another Civil Rights Act. But the situation would stay the same.
Good afternoon, Dr. Cotton. I have a question for you.
Watch yourself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Outside of the laws, at what moment did you see any significant change, or what was it that you saw that the fight that you all was doing at the time was actually gaining some momentum? So what happened in your life, or something that you seen happen outside of the laws that was passed, that you feel like made a great impact and did some changing in history?
Well, what I saw, what I was concerned with, it was outside of the law, because the law was working against us. What I looked to as progress was the number of people we were able to get the message to, and who made up their mind that they would stand up and fight for their rights. And it wasn't so much the little bills and little stuff like that, but as we began to grow in numbers, like around by the time this Freedom Democratic Party, for instance, where we, had thousands of people who were involved. And I knew then that things had to change, and that was important. Whether they put a bill up or not, the people had changed. That's what has to happen now. The people have to change for us to move forward.
Mr. Cotton, you mentioned the Freedom Democratic Party. Can you tell us a little bit about those early days and the creation of the party, and maybe some of those key players like Ms. Hamer, who helped found the party, and just tell us a little bit about its organization in those early days?
I think the concept of the Freedom Democratic Party started like maybe around by 62, I think. For the first thing we were doing was running candidates. We ran Reverend L.T. Smith, I think, for governor, and other people or whatever, senators and whatever, to basically to demonstrate that we expect to have political power, and also gave us a chance to speak, use the media to speak to the masses of people. And of course, we went into, somebody came up with the idea of challenging the precinct meetings, probably about the next year. So we organized our precincts and challenged the precinct meetings. So the Freedom Democratic Party, like the rest of the movement, it didn't start in '64. We step by step. So eventually, we had a statewide organization that was interested in, making sure that we have our political rights and political participation.
A lot has been said and written about the 1964 National Democratic Convention in Atlantic City. Can you share just a little bit about that convention and maybe some of your personal thoughts and feelings?
You probably know much about it as I do. Those of you who looked at TV, I didn't go to the convention myself because I'm concerned about other people who would like to go, and I didn't want to take up their space. But I guess maybe what you're talking about is what we all saw on TV. well, yeah, that I think the important thing about it, since I must talk, is that we brought new politics to America. They didn't understand people politics. They had forgotten all about it. They thought that they supposed to say, well, okay, you get Joe over here and Tom over here, and y'all going back home. And if y'all need anything, tell him, he tell us, or whatever. Instead, we said, no, we came as a delegation, and that's what we expect to be. Everybody here represents somebody. So we're not going to have you picking a leader out for us. And I think that was the difference. And of course, that's what the Freedom Democratic Party was built on, one person, one vote, everybody equal participation and all that. So we were able to get it up to where it belonged, I guess, in a national convention.
I have another question. Thinking back, and I was not old enough to fully participate in this civil rights movement as it was going along, but I do remember some, and I think back to comments that people were making that was not all positive. So my concern is, back then and today, what kind of efforts should be made to educate people about what's going on? Because what you were trying to do was in the best interest of everybody, but not everyone, in my opinion, fully understood what it was all about. And also, thinking about what happened then and what's happening now, how do you see the process going forward?
Well, I was thinking you were saying you were too young to vote. Most of us were too. There was in SNCC at the time. We were waiting, trying to encourage people to vote. But people know the issues. Well, naturally, one person will not know all the issues, but collectively, the people knew the issues. They get together. They know the issues. It's just a matter of where we had to eliminate the terror in which that they would face when they went to vote. Like I think they had a thing where I think it was law, I believe, that they have to run the name and address of the person that registered for, I think, for 2 weeks or something like that. I think that was the law. But anyway, that gave those who would be against them time to go and harass them and run them out of town and all that kind of stuff. And I think, well, the difference in what we did when they attempted to run us out of town, they shot somebody. Instead of leaving, we called a few people we had, we would come to the place. So that kind of turned things around. They expected to run us to Chicago or whatever. Instead, we ran to, to Greenwood or to Natchez or to wherever the trouble was. So their tactic didn't work so well. So that gave us the opportunity. First, it gave the people opportunity to see that there were people who were going to stand. If they'll stand, they said, well, I will too. But so often we had the situation where, Mr. Walter White and different other people got, they were doing well, but got threatened and, had to leave town for whatever reason. And of course, some of them just got killed, like Reverend Lee and people like that. So, so it's just more of a demonstrating steadfastness.
This is a follow-up in some ways to the question Drew asked before about Bob Moses. Most of the people who were organizing or SNCC in Mississippi were organizing in a place they were from. You were from Walthall County, that was home. There were also people from elsewhere in the South who came in, and people from Michigan, New York, DC who came in. Can you talk a little about the differences and how all of that worked together? And were there separations between the people who were from here and the people who came in as organizers from the outside?
Well, we had a little, some, I guess, small difference in customs or whatever, but wasn't that major difference, nothing that we couldn't talk through. And then when you are in a situation where the outside is hostile, you don't have very much time to be spending time on your little differences. You'll be looking for what you can do together.
We have another question from the live stream. Ms. Payne asked us, can you talk or comment about the difference in voting from the 70s and 80s, where there was far more individuals that were participating in the electoral process versus today?
I'm not aware of that very well. I don't. Are you talking about when you say? I don't think I understand the question.
I think she's asking is that there were more individuals, more Americans participating, I guess percentage-wise, that were participating after the Voting Rights Act in the late 60s, early 70s, and 80s compared to today, was her statement.
So, okay.
I think she just wanted to know if you had a comment.
I don't really have any statistics, any facts about, the number of participants. I was thinking that it had increased, but if you say it's less, I have to go along with that because I haven't done any research on that particular aspect.
We've got time for one more question.
Thank you, Dr. Cotton. In the summer of 1964, people often inexperienced, particularly in the movement here from all over the country, were invited to come to Mississippi to work. Can you talk about how that decision was made to do that? And also, frankly, did it make, at the time, was your ground on the job any easier or more difficult by having all these people who hadn't been working with you before come to help?
Well, once we think about the purpose of the 64 project, the purpose, well, we had, let me say, we started out with summer projects every summer up until 64. But this time we decided to do a special thing because they was picking us off one by one, was killing a lot of our people. And there were some among us who thought that if we were, I think Bob put it like he said, if the citizens' children was down here, we would get some respect since we weren't considered citizens. So we'll pull in citizens from, other parts of the country who would be willing to come down. And many of those people, parents were, lawyers and bankers and all that kind of stuff and professors. So they were very concerned about making sure that violence would be, lessened. And with the incident of those 3 civil rights murders, that even provoked a response from the FBI and all those people, because here again, it wasn't a Medgar Evers, and it wasn't a Reverend Lee, and it wasn't a Mr. Lee. It was a Goodman and Schroner, and of course it's not. I'm not listening to Cheney, who really was a good friend of mine, but I'm just saying because of who they were, the FBI came, because the FBI was right there when Herbert Lee got killed. Matter of fact, I think the FBI, and looking at the files and the study, it seemed the FBI was instrumental in Lewis Allen murder. So, but this way, it helped relieve us of some of the anticipated violence, and it probably worked. There's no way to say what would have happened if it didn't, but it did, and I guess it worked for what it was designed for.
Okay, my name is Holmes, Charles Holmes, and I was at the Tula's graduation when you got the award. I was at 6:30 that morning. But anyway, what I'm doing, what I tell my granddaughter is 9. She was named after my wife. My wife never saw her. And I hope if my wife will teach her how to read. But right now, I don't know if you've done it, I put everything on tape. You know what I mean? I talk about my life, I talk about this in archive. And so I'm learning now, and my daughter makes certain that I'm doing it. Every time she come home, she put the tape in my mouth. So I'm explaining to my ancestors, future, if they listen to it, they might pick it up. You know what I mean? When I was teaching, if I had to teach something about rap, I would learn something about rap. I have to understand who's my audience. You might have been a student, what year was that? Like poetry. Like this morning, I was talking about Ezra and Nehemiah. So I try to put it into the context when they were writing and so forth. What did that mean? That means I have to read the Bible, try to understand it, and I've been in it since 1949. I got to understand and talk to my ancestors. What did they mean by this? What did they mean by that? What did Thomas Jefferson do like this? And you said something I cherish. They were using the law to keep us down, but the Sixth Amendment, the right to counsel, it means you can use the law as a weapon or a shield. You teach them how to use the same law and defend our people's rights. That's lawyers. talking about a lawyer, right to counsel. So you read and understand your adversary. Outthink them. That's what our ancestors are doing right now, Brother Mac. We listen to them. We might not like what they say, but you listen to them and try to put it in the context. Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, and the rest of them. To be continued later.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the top of another hour of History's Lunch. Let's give Dr. MacArthur Cotton another round of applause. While we're also standing, we also have a number of civil rights veterans that are in the room today. And so we have a request from Ms. Palmer to make sure that those of you that are in the room to stay, we'd like to get a group picture with Mr. Cotton before you leave. We also have Mr. Cotton's book, Mississippi's Black Cotton, available for purchase. If we run out, we have plenty of pre-orders that we can do for you as well. We're so thankful to have you here with us again this week. Next week, on May 28th, we'll have Dr. Ivory Phillips with us for presenting the Ayers case, a fight for equity in Mississippi higher education. So once again, Dr. MacArthur Cotton.
Thank you. It worked.